Jonathan Schrager here for Stretty News TV. I'm joined today with the Old Trafford, a familiar backdrop here, Danny, in hotel football. And I'm joined today by Manchester United alumnus, 94 to 2000, Danny Higginbotham. First of all, Danny, how are we doing?
Yeah, I'm doing very well, thank you. Just had a nice holiday. Obviously the season just beginning as well, so not playing anymore, but still full on with everything else. So it's very enjoyable after a nice break.
Good stuff. Well, first question, I think the obvious question to ask is, obviously by your sort of northern twang, we can tell you're a Manchester lad. Yeah. Red or blue growing up?
No, red. So could only ever have been a red. All my family were reds, and there's no way you could go over to be a blue. I was at Manchester City as a youngster from about the age of 9, only for about a year, and I was playing local football, and Brian Kidd, who looked after the youth at Manchester United at the time.
Yeah.
We were playing in an interleague game, and which is like they pick the best players out of the Sunday League. And Brian Kidd pulled my dad to one side and he said, how's Danny and things like that. Like, yeah, he's all right. He said, what colour's your house? So the first thing my dad said, it's red. It's always been red. Yeah. And on no uncertain terms, he said, well, what are you doing with that lot? Yeah. And that's when I went to Manchester United then, and obviously it was great to get involved with a club that I'd supported as well.
So did you go, because sort of doing a bit of research, did you go directly from City to United then?
Yeah, I think we were at a situation, it's all changed now. I think you sign contracts at a football club now when you're 8, which is another debate which I don't agree with. But at that age you couldn't sign any contracts, so I was at Manchester City training with the older lads. Yeah. Because I was too young to obviously sign any forms at Centre of Excellence. And then it was just after that really that I came straight to Manchester United, and was fortunate enough there to have my education for a long time. So
sort of could you sort of relate it to Ryan Giggs' story then? Was it a similar sort of poaching story? I believe he was transferred on his birthday.
He's a Manchester United legend, isn't he? So I don't think I was going to lose any sleep over that. But no, I think he's completely. The similarities are that I was at Manchester City first and come to Manchester United, but I think that and curly hair is where it stops, to be honest with you.
I was going to ask then, obviously, so you've come to United, you're a United fan. Was it the stuff dreams are made of then as a youngster? I imagine it must have been.
Yeah, it was, because obviously my family's background is in terms of supporting Manchester United. I was lucky enough to be coached at a young age by Nobby Stiles, who was a Manchester United legend as well. And the beauty of it for me was that you didn't realise at the time, but at the age of say 11, 12, we train on every Monday evening at the Cliff. Yeah. And some young apprentices used to come and join in with us. So we were like 11 or 12, and they were 16, 17, and you didn't realise at the time, but these young apprentices that were coming in to join in with us was David Beckham, Nicky Butt, Paul Scholes, Gary Neville, and for me, like even at that age, I used to look across. Because obviously they weren't household names in there or anything, and it just got straight into your system from that age that they were apprentices, so they were training all day. Yeah. And then in the evening, coming back and training with us kids and joining in with us, and that was something that I learned very, very early at a football club like Manchester United. Players I've just mentioned, they're Manchester United legends, and they had an unbelievable career, and I don't think a batch like that will come through again. But the one thing that I learned over the years, even when I became an apprentice there and they were established first team players, was that it doesn't matter how good you are, you've got to have that work ethic. You train how you play, and it was something that set me in good stead throughout my career.
And even at that age, like you mentioned there, was there a palpable desire amongst those players, class of '92, that would rub off on you?
Yeah, of course. Why would they be there otherwise? At the end of training sessions, it was probably a 3/4 size pitch inside at the Cliff on the AstroTurf, and David Beckham even then would have the tyres in the goal, tied up in a corner. He's 16, 17 years of age. Yeah. And he's taking free kicks, trying to get them through the tyres and everything. And that was something that, as a youngster for me, you always idolise people that are older than you, or you always look to follow people that are older than you, whether they are well known or not. Yeah. Especially if they're doing the same thing as you, and for me to be an 11, 12-year-old and seeing that happening was something that at first it probably baffled you a little bit, that they'd been training all day but then wanted to go and do that. But as time went on, I love football and I couldn't get enough of it, and it was something that got into a lot of trouble with my dad when I became an apprentice at Manchester United, because I was training with the football club full time 16, 17, and then I used to go and play with my mates on a car park which is now a big Tesco's. And it was funny because my dad used to drink at the local pub there called The Bridge.
Yeah.
And I always used to get one of my mates, just keeping an eye out for when he came out, because I knew if he caught me that I'd be in big trouble. And one day, my mate wasn't doing as good a job as he should have been. My dad saw me and I walked home, knocked on the door to go in, and thinking I might have got away with it. And he answered the door, and we all, from like the age of 16, we all got given club suits. He had this suit, my suit in his hand, and he just threw it in my face. And he just said, "Get out of here, I don't want to see you again."
Yeah.
So I was left wandering around our estate for about 2 hours, and then he came and found me.
Was that his concern that you would have to do something else aside from football in the eventuality that maybe football didn't work out, or was it due to the fact he was worried about you sustaining injury, messing about with your mates?
That was the biggest thing. My parents, one thing, I love them dearly, and they did everything as in terms of me playing football and things like that. And they looked at me from a young age, saw that I had some ability, and whether it be right or whether it be wrong, I would never do it with my kids now, because education, I've been through football and things like that, and there's a lot of ups and downs. It's very difficult to make it as a footballer. So the education is the most important thing for my children. But with my dad, you know, education-wise, I wasn't the greatest. You know, I'll be the first one to admit that. But he would let me have days off school on a Monday if for some reason, which happened quite a lot. I had a match on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I was tired on a Monday. It was very rare, but he'd give me the day off sometimes. And his thing for me, which is very difficult for me to say to any of my sons, is that, you know, he always used to say to me, you know, look where you live now, do you want better than this? Yeah. And that wasn't my main desire to become a footballer. I wanted to become a footballer because I loved it. You know, at that age, money's not on your mind whatsoever. Yeah. And so, it was something definitely. Playing with friends in a car park was something that he didn't want me to do. But stupidly, I carried on. Yeah. I carried on because, you know, that's what you want to do as a kid. I couldn't get enough of football, so I'd do that. And even when eventually I moved to Derby playing in the Premier League, I would have a game on the Saturday, and then on Sunday I'd go and nets with my mates. You look back and it was stupid, but that was my love for football. I couldn't get enough of it. And when I wasn't playing with you know, the team that I was with at the time, I wanted to be. So I'd go and relax, go and play with my mates, and just hope that my dad didn't see me.
So what, you'd literally, when you're at Derby, you'd literally be playing what, in a Sunday league with your pals?
No, what I'd do, we'd play on a Saturday.
Yeah.
So we'd have a Premier League game on the Saturday, then on the Sunday I'd come back round, you know, near my mum and dad's house, and they'd be having a tenner-side, and I'd go in there.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I'd go in there. They'd be having a game between the mates. And you look back and it's stupid now, but that was just something for me. I love football, and it was something that I was very fortunate to be able to. You never call it a job, but to get paid to do something that you love doing, and I just couldn't get enough of it. So more often than not, on a Sunday, I'd go in net with my mates.
I think that also highlights the period that you grew up in playing football. There still was that element of romance around the game, and that kind of story is something that would probably be unheard of nowadays with all the kind of the professionalism in the game as such. But
yeah, I think so. But I also think that the generation now is very different. I think it's very much money orientated. As a youngster, you know, when I was still at United, you know, we'd all have dinner together, and if I was fortunate enough at the time to be sat near one of the first team players, you wouldn't hear a peep from me. I'd just be like a sponge taking it all. And even when I went to Derby, you know, there was a lot of experienced senior professionals there. Yeah. And you go and sit on a table with them and eat and things like that. And you'd just be a sponge. You'd just be listening to everything, and you wanted what they had. And I'm not talking about the cars, the watches. You wanted the experiences of playing in these big games. Yeah. You know, playing however amount of Premier League games, whereas, you know, now a lot of the time, towards the end of my career, and it really frustrated me, a lot of the younger players coming up to me and saying, you know, what car are you driving, what watch have you got? And I just think that tables have turned a little bit now, and unfortunately it's due to the way you're brought up as in terms of football now. You're given too much too soon instead of having to earn it. And that's something that, in my opinion, people say, you know, well, what's going wrong with the academies and thing in football now? And I think that there was never any need to abolish the apprenticeship.
Yeah. And a question that I've asked a few of your, well, former teammates, you could call them, but trainees that were actually a little bit younger than yourself, Danny Pugh, Danny Nardiello, Danny Webb, those sort of lads, all Danny's as well, ironically. But I've asked them, because they sort of would have grew up around the time as well, maybe just post the class of '92, but they'll have seen that it is possible for youngsters from the trainee system to come through.
Yeah.
I know, like you said, it's a bit of a rarity that they all come through at once.
Oh,
but when you saw them playing, and obviously you played a little bit of training games with them as well, it must have been a massive source of inspiration for yourself as a young lad, thinking, well, yeah, it is possible to come through and break into the club here.
I think Manchester United, especially under Sir Alex Ferguson at the time, they were known for bringing youngsters through. And the one thing that you always had in the back of your mind is that no matter how big the football club is, they would always give youngsters a chance if they thought that you were good enough. Now, I'm not one of them people that's going to say, well, I don't think I was given a fair enough chance at Manchester United. I played a few games. I was fortunate enough to play 7-8 games, and it got to the point where I wasn't good enough. And I'm the first one to accept that. And I just think at times that although when you join a club like Manchester United as a youngster, you have that dream to be a first team player, to be an established first team player. Yeah. But you also have to know when the time is right to move. And I think there's a lot of players during my time and even before and maybe after that probably outstayed the welcome, so to speak, because the association with Manchester United is so great. And I think that as a youngster, your timing has to be spot on, because if not, you will waste away your career. Your career could be on a downward spiral at the age of 22, 23, and you don't want that. I was 21 when I left the football club. I think 7 months earlier, I'd only just signed a new 4-year contract. So if I'd wanted to, I could have been at the club till I was 24, 25. But, Derby obviously came in with an offer as a Premier League club, and at the time, Sir Alex Ferguson, he actually personally rang me. And he said to me, we've had an offer from Derby, we've accepted it. You don't need to go, but we've got Dennis Irwin here, Phil Neville, Mikel Silvestre. So it's going to be difficult for you. Within that phone call, my mind was made up, because if Sir Alex Ferguson wanted to keep me, he could have done one or two things. Not told me that Derby had come in for me, or more so, rung me up and said, listen, just to let you know how well you're doing, Derby have come in for you, put a good offer in for you, but we don't want you going anywhere because we want you part of this football club. So I knew my time had come, and I think it's very, very important in football, especially for a youngster, that you've got to stand on your own 2 feet at some point if it's not working at the club you grew up at. Yeah,
and before we sort of touch upon a little bit more about when you moved away from United, I wanted to ask as well, you sort of referenced the Cliff there, and obviously I'm a Manchester lad. I remember growing up and going to watch the players at the Cliff, and obviously there were all the sort of legendary stories about Eric Cantona staying behind and signing, even getting out of his car to sign people's autographs, which were true because I saw it with my own eyes. Were there any stories in particular from that era, because it was a golden era at the club, of you training as a youngster and as a trainee at the Cliff, looking up to players? I know you've mentioned the Beckhams and the younger players coming through, but the more senior established ones, like just remembering Eric Cantona at the training ground, for example.
Well, there's a few different ones. I think Ryan Giggs was one. My dad used to put his job on the line, because every morning he'd drop me at the bottom of the I think it was Lower Broughton Road, and I'd make that walk up towards the Cliff, and there was like a burger bar at the bottom, so I always used to stop. Not always, but quite often I used to stop and get myself a bacon and egg sandwich. So I'd have it as I was walking up the hill. So this one time I'm walking up the hill, and got this bacon and egg sandwich. I've just had a bite of it. I can hear this sports car coming behind me, and he's just pulled over, and the windows wound down, and all I can hear is, Danny. So I've had a look, and I've gone over to the window, and it was Ryan Giggs, and he's like, come on, get in the car. So first of all, one of my idols anyway, because I was a youngster growing up, but I've got this bacon and egg sandwich, and I'm thinking to myself, just don't take another bite of the sandwich, just sit down, and just whatever you do not spill egg all over the car. So that was one of the things. But that's another thing, you see. What makes this club so special is the fact that I was here from a young age, obviously, and I left at 21, and I only played a few first team games. But every time, like I'm here now, I can remember. I think it was late last season. No, was it late last season? Yeah, I think it was late last season. I was doing some stuff for MUTV, and we were doing it pitch side, and obviously. Ryan Giggs, he was doing, a little bit of work with the first team players and things like that, and in between filming, he's just come over, just come over and said, Danny, how you doing, and things like that, and that's what's so special about this football club. Is the things of that you may have left this football club years ago, you may have not played many games, but if you've grown up at this football club, and I think if people see you as a decent person, you're not forgotten. There's been quite a few times when I've been at the ground as well, and other people have stopped me to do with the football club to chat about things, and it'll be people I haven't seen for 10, 15 years, and that's what makes this club unique, and it's something that I hope continues for a long, long time, because to have the football club that size, but to come back 14, 15 years after after I left, I didn't really make a name for myself here or anything like that, but for people to stop, chat, and things like that, I just think that's something that's very special about the club. But going back to being youngster, there was a lot of different things. I had a situation with Roy Keane, who was great with me as a youngster. He was brilliant.
Obviously
with me.
Someone you latterly went on to play under as a manager.
He was really, really good to me. I used to clean his boots. And I used to clean his boots, Brian McClare's boots. I used to get great pleasure from it.
Yeah.
I used to go home and tell my mates, and all my mates would be really jealous of it. It's not something that I think you'd get now from players and things like that, but I loved it. And
was there ever any blood on Keano's boots?
No, no. But I used to love getting the boots. I know it's a weird thing to say and a bizarre thing to say, but the dirtier the boots were, the better it was, because it was then my job to make them brand new for the morning. Of course, if they came back to me and they just had a session at the cliff, or the grass was dry and there was no mud anywhere, didn't like it, because all you had to do was like put a little bit of polish on, and that was done. But if they came to me in a mess, you couldn't see the the sponsor signs and things like that, I was like, okay, it's a duty for me now to get these as clean as possible. I used to take great pride in it. Yeah. And one afternoon I've come back and Roy was brilliant, because when he was with High Tech, he used to give me his old High Tech boots. Theodora used to do the same as well, because I cleaned his boots and things like that. And this one particular day, I've come back from training. We were training in the afternoon, and Jonathan Green, I think, was injured at the time. As I walked into the doors at the cliff, John was coming to me and said, listen, he said, Roy's been looking for you. And I'm thinking to myself, what's the problem? And he said, listen, I said, I don't know the full story. He said, but you need to speak to him, because apparently someone that it said they're an agent and has got in touch with Theodora saying that you want a boot deal. And I was like, you are kidding me, aren't you? And I still don't know to this day who it was. But the thing is, one thing that was good at Manchester United then was that the youngsters, you didn't need an agent. Yeah. They were frowned upon because you were looked after by the football club. And I think Sir Alex Ferguson, he didn't want that. And the thing with Roy, what I found was great, was that he didn't like any big time charters. Yeah. He didn't like anything like that. And I think he appreciated people that wanted to get their head down and work and things like that. So I've got home, and obviously I'm still living with mum and dad, and I need to ring him. Yeah. I've got to ring him. I said, because this is just going to fester with me all night, and then I've got to go in tomorrow and then see what the problem is. So I've managed to get his phone number. I've rang, and his wife's answered, and he's just said, listen, Roy's out walking the dogs. So I was like, okay. I said, do you mind if I call back in 10, 15 minutes? And it's like, yeah, no problem. So I rang up, and he answered the phone. I'm thinking to myself, I don't know what's going to happen now, and I just picked up the phone. He answered the phone and just said, listen, Roy, about this situation. I said, I don't know. I said, I haven't got an agent. I said, I don't know any agents. Yeah. And whoever it is that's wrong, Theodora, it's absolutely nothing to do with me. So first I want to apologise, because in case it's caused you any aggravation. So, but just want you to know that I'd never do anything like that, because you've been good enough to give me your boots. And then he was unbelievable with me. Yeah. He just went down, he said, listen, I think you're a good lad. Yeah. You're just starting out in your football career, he said, and one thing I'll tell you is that you don't need any agent. You don't need things like that. I was only 17 at the time, something like that. He said, you don't need an agent. I went, I know. I said, I don't need anything like that, and I don't want anything like that. And he was brilliant. He was great. He said, listen, you know that I give you boots and things like that. I said, I'll look after you with stuff like that, and that was it. Yeah. But it just goes to show, even at that age, that there's people on the outside that try and do things like that, and fortunately, he believed what I was saying, and it was sorted out. Yeah, and that kind of familial aspect of the club, a lot of the young lads kind of reiterate what you're saying there when it comes to, I remember Danny Webber was saying how Sir Alex had let him come back and train at the club when he was injured at one point towards the end of his career, and it's kind of this, you build this picture of a very sort of, like you say, family-run club, that kind of feeling, and that neatly segues on to the next question as well. I was going to ask you, you sort of mentioned how it's retained that family aspect a little bit, and you hope that it continues to do so for the young lads coming through now. But obviously the club, certainly since you joined, when it was on the cusp of really becoming a global footballing superpower again, would you say it's almost unrecognisable in some regards, isn't it? I mean, I know you do a lot of work with MUTV now, so you're back in and around the club a lot. Yeah. Is it almost unrecognisable to the club that you joined back in the early 90s? I think so, yeah, because what you had at the time then, which is something that you don't get in modern day football, is a manager that, has been there for so long, probably implemented everything about the football club was because that was one of the first things when he came into the football club. One of the first things he wanted to get right was the youth setup.
Yeah.
You know, and so it is. Obviously, it's going to be different, you know, because you've had a couple of managers in the last year, you know, Van Gaal's obviously in now, and it's different as in the terms of when Sir Alex Ferguson was here, it was his club.
Yeah.
So when he came into the club, obviously things didn't start right, but then when things started to go right, he'd near enough sorted it all out from top to bottom. You probably go as far down as, you know, probably the School of Excellence. The majority of them people that were employed at the football club were probably down to Sir Alex Ferguson, especially in the early days. So there was probably a connection with everybody from the youth all the way up.
Yeah.
You know, you saw it with Brian Kidd. Brian Kidd at one point was, you know, he was my manager at under 12s, under 11s, and then all of a sudden, you know, he's then Sir Alex Ferguson's assistant manager.
Yeah.
Eric Harrison, you know, he coached me, and you know, he coached the class of '92. Then he was running the youth team. So there was a lot of different people that were building their way up the football club through different ages. That Sir Alex Ferguson, maybe not every single one of them, but he brought the majority of them to the football club because they believed that they had the same imprint as himself. I think so. That's where it is different. But that takes time to do when a new manager comes to a football club, and I think unless you have another manager, which is very unlikely, you know, for 15, 20 years, it's difficult for that to happen. I would imagine that Arsenal now, under Arsene Wenger, is probably similar to what it was 10 years ago because he was still the manager.
Yeah.
But, you know, things will change because new managers come in, they have new ideas, they have new philosophies and new things. So you just hope that, you know, because there is still a lot of people here from when I was here, so you hope that tradition does carry on because it is, like you say, it's very unique to have a club as big as Manchester United to be like that.
Yeah, and just sort of now going on a little bit to when you did sign as a trainee, I believe it was '94 that you actually signed your forms as a trainee.
No, did I? I think I left school in '95.
Right.
So it would have been '95. Yeah, I'm sure that's when I joined the club.
Right.
Full time.
Full time, and then just looking at your class of players. Which were the lads first of all, can't remember specifically the year, that went on to make a real impact in the first team, or who at the time did you believe had that ability to go on and do so?
It was interesting because between the age of 16 and 18 are, 16 and 19 is such an unbelievable 3 years. That for me can be a make or break. I remember at the end, my first season, I honestly believe if Manchester United could have done, because I had 2 years apprenticeship, I'd probably been one of the ones that was released.
Right.
I didn't have a great first season at all, and the first year and second year apprentices all went to South Africa, and there was 3 of us left behind, and I was one of them.
Right.
And it didn't. And then I know it sounds bizarre, but the best thing that ever happened to me was, I think about April time in my first year as an apprentice. I broke my leg, I broke my femur.
Yeah.
And it was touch and go whether I'd ever play again. So I was out then, I think, till September, October time, and I then probably had maybe 5 or 6 months to prove my worth. And I never forget what I used to do, because when I broke my leg, I had to take a little step back and not reevaluate what I was doing, because I was only young at the time. But what probably I realised more about myself then is that I wanted to be a footballer. There was no doubt about it, but I just didn't realise how much I wanted to be a footballer until I broke my leg. Because I never forget, it was obviously in the summer, I had to come in every day in the summer, and I lived in Altrincham, and obviously the cliff was in Salford, and I couldn't drive at the time, so I rode in every day to the cliff on my mountain bike, which is, I'm just trying
it's a fair distance. Yeah, no, it's
got to be
North
talking
Manchester
20.
myself.
Must be 20.
It's a fair distance, yeah.
20 miles, I think, at least. Would you say?
I would, yeah, certainly 10, 15. I mean, I'd usually get the motorway from north to south, but
But I'd have to come all the way down, obviously Chester Road, Washaway Road, then Chester Road, then all the way through there. So, and I was doing that every day, and it was weird because I couldn't play football. I was like, right, okay, what can I do that's going to, strengthen things up?
Yeah.
So I would ride every single day. I'd be in the gym, and being injured is awful, especially when it's long term. But being injured during the summer and you're in at the cliff, and there's you and the physio.
Yeah.
It becomes mind-numbing. Even at that age, it does. You know, Dave Fevo was a fantastic physio. He looked after me along with Rob Swires.
Yeah.
And I started to get fit again, but then this was another thing. My mum and dad never found out about this, but my mates were still playing football, and I had to have this cast made. I was never in plaster, but it was like a cast that was made purposely for me, so it would bend at the knee.
Yeah.
I'd play football with crutches on the local park, and as I was running, I fell, and this leg went right behind me, and I heard like loads of like cracking in my leg, and I was like, oh God, I really panicked.
Yeah.
So the next day I pulled Dave and I said, listen, Dave, I said, please don't say anything to anybody, but I've done this.
Yeah.
And after he'd flipping ripped my head off,
yeah.
he just said, listen, we'll get you to see the specialist. Went to see the specialist, explained it to him, and he said, listen, don't ever do that again, but I can't believe how you've done it, but you've ripped up all your scar tissue and it's actually helped your injury. So from that day on, that was when I was like, right, okay, just get a grip of things. And then I remember coming back my first game. There was a lad called Graham Tomlinson. He got a bad injury at the same time. He'd done his fibula in his tibia and his shin. And we both were out the same amount of time. It was around about the time that David Booth did his bad injury.
Yeah.
And when I got back in, just going back a minute, when I got back into the cliff after, because I was in hospital for 2.5 weeks, there was a card waiting for me. David Booster sent me a card. So I went to see him personally, and he was such a gentleman.
Yeah.
You know, for him to send me a card, I was 17 years of age after what he'd just been through, and it was really nice to speak to him. You know, and get his experiences from a proper, you know, senior professional footballer.
Yeah.
But then, going back, I remember my first game back, I was playing for the B team, and I remember playing, it was at home, and it's something I'd waited such a long time for. I was really looking forward to it. And I think after about 25 minutes, I got smacked right on my femur, and I was down on the floor, and I was like, I've broke my leg again. I thought I'd broke my leg again, and I've gone off the pitch, and I got driven back to the cliff because I couldn't move properly, and Peter Smike was there, Andy Cole. First thing the pair of them did, you know, me being 17, come to said, listen, you know, I hope you're all right. If there's anything we can do, you know, please let us know, which I thought was really good of them. So I went to the hospital, had a scan, and everything was fine. Yeah. It was the best thing that could have happened to me, because I knew then that I was absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Whereas like Graham,
tested it out.
Whereas Graham, you know, he was a fantastic footballer. You know, he was talk of high hopes for him here. He got like a big shin pad made because he was wary of his shin, and I don't think he ever got over that. Over the fear of being hit on it again.
The psychological
side of things, where I had no choice because I got it in the first few minutes of my first game back, and then played in the Youth Cup, and that was probably the best 7 months of my early career. And I got told that I was getting, you know, professional forms, and then when I got home, there was a letter at home, and I'd been given 2 years, which was unbelievable. And I think yes, they saw that I had ability, but looking back now, you don't at the time, but looking back now, I think what made it be 2 years instead of that 1 year was that they saw the desire I had. They saw what I went through when I was injured, the fact that I was cycling in every day. Yeah. And I think that was a big thing for them to look at and go, okay, well, we could give him 1 year, but you see his desire, his commitment, his determination. You know, if you've got that, you're 50% of the way there of making a professional footballer. And I think they saw that. And that was what I think set me in good stead, and you know, and then I went from strength to strength at the club probably for the next 2 or 3 years. Yeah.
So you signed your pro contract in '97, I believe.
Yes.
And so I suppose it's it's a curious one, because like you mentioned there, you referenced the trio of left backs that obviously you will be deputising for if you were to go in and get your chance, which you did on a number of occasions, but Dennis Irwin was arguably one of the greatest left back, if not the greatest left back to represent the club. Yeah. For you to be a young left back coming up and aspiring to that kind of level, that must have been an inspiration in itself, to see Dennis and how consistent he was. He was unbelievable. To be arguably the best left back that this club's ever had. Yeah. And to be right-footed. Yeah. Is something that he was brilliant as well. I know I keep saying about all the players then, but absolute gentleman. Yeah. He would stop, he would take time, he'd chat to you and things like that. When I did get my opportunity in the first team, he'd be the first one to come up to me afterwards and say, you know, well done and things like that. And I think the 97-98 season was
it was a progressive season for me massively. You know, I think I started off in the 18, then I got into the reserves, and I think a few of the lads had played. A few lads had played towards the end of the season.
Yeah.
And I was just like, okay, well, probably not going to get my chance and what have you. And then I never forget, I think it was a Friday. I've been called into the office. Sir Alex Ferguson had offered me a new contract, even though I still had a year left. So I was, walking on air, felt about 100 foot tall. And then I went down, and then just as I'm walking out the office, he just said, listen, Danny, he said, can you do me a favour? Obviously, we're playing, I think it might have been the Sunday.
Right.
Said, I think we're playing on the Sunday, but will you do us a favour, because a lot of us are going to be away, will you do an appearance for us, like at, a local school, something like that? So I was like, okay, yeah, no problem. So I'm walking downstairs, and as I've got into the dressing room, the reserve team dressing room, and it was nice for him to ask me, but I was a little bit disappointed that I wasn't going to be involved, because I think, there was a few lads, I think the World Cup was coming up, so none of the lads that were playing in that they didn't win the league that year. So I was a little bit disappointed. So I've gone in there, and there's a knock on the door, and it's Sir Alex Ferguson. He pops his head round and he just said to me, forget that appearance, you're travelling with the first team. And I was just like, wow. And looking back at it, I'm thinking to myself, was that just a bit of a test?
Yeah.
Was it a bit of a test to see how I reacted to him saying that to me initially, or what? And, I was at Barnsley when Barnsley were in the Premier League, and my mum and dad came, and it was when the away fans were in the old stand. There was no roof on it. I never forget, mum and dad got absolutely drenched. And I think I played the last half hour, and it was such an unbelievable occasion for me to be in that situation. It was, I've got that shirt hung up. I'd given it to my mum and dad, and had it framed properly, because it was my first Manchester United shirt.
And I suppose there were so many questions to ask from that. First of all, I was going to mention as well, Dennis, someone that you now work alongside at the club as well, I imagine. TV work. I know he's more of a club ambassador.
Oh yeah, he is, and rightly so. Yeah.
You still work alongside him, don't you? So is it funny to sort of look back on those days when he was trying to impart advice on you, and do you chat about those sort of golden days in the 90s?
To be honest with you, no, because I was at this, obviously grew up at this football club, and I like to think that I don't work at MUTV because I'm a Manchester United legend or this, that, whatever. I like to think that, they have me working at the channel because they like what I do, and they think I'm good. And I do have an association with Manchester United. So, to be honest with you, when I have spoken to Dennis, I spent quite a bit of time with him last year. When I went over to America for pre-season touring, and obviously he is one of the United legends. There was himself, Brian Robson, and they were doing all these things. So we would go along and ask him questions and interview him. So it's but off air, Brian Robson, another legend, one of the best midfielders to ever play for the football club. It's strange, but because your football career's ended, you don't speak like you used to play when you used to play football. There's an unbelievable admiration from me to them. Yeah. But now it's just a general chat about this, that, and what have you. Do you know what I mean? Not football in general, but it's great because there's no airs and graces about them. Yeah. They've been there, they've done it at the football club. They are rightly so ambassadors for the football club, as the likes of Andy Cole and people like that. And rightly so, and I think it's fantastic that they do that for the football club because they were such great names here. But when you see them, it's just a general chat. If anything, you actually end up chatting about your children. Yeah. And as in terms of, they're at an academy, or they're doing this, or they're doing that, and things like that. So there becomes like a little bit of a connection there, because especially if you've got sons and things like that, and obviously, Andy Colley, his son's doing really well as well. So it ends up tending to be stuff like that really than things during the football career, because the one thing that and people have questioned me on it before is that I was very fortunate. I couldn't have done any more in my football career. I don't look back, I've got no regrets. If anything, I'll probably overachieve. But as far as I'm concerned, what I do now with the media side of things, it's great because it opens the doors for you, but you've still got to prove that you're good at what you do. Yeah. As far as I'm concerned, football's finished now for me as a player. And I know a lot of people do like to reminisce about when they were playing, but for me, I look at it was that it was a different life. That life's finished now, so draw a line under it. I think I dwelt on it probably for about 45 minutes when my career finished. Yeah. Just speaking to people and things like that and having a few drinks. But other than that, that's it. And what I don't want to be is, and I have said this, unfortunately, it's starting to go that way now. I don't want people getting in touch with me or people chatting to me and saying, I remember when you scored that goal for Stoke or you did this. I don't want that anymore. What I would like is people coming up to saying, oh, you know what you said on the radio or what you did on the television. Really, I thought that was good. I agreed with you and things like that. That's because that's the here and now, and that's what I am. It's like, you know, I did with part of the book. We did a book signing at Stoke a couple of months ago before Southampton game, and I'd never been back to Stoke since I'd finished. Yeah. Sorry, I think I've been back twice, but it's just to do commentary. And I didn't know about it, but they wanted me to go on the pitch before the game, so I did it. And you know, but as nice as it was, I felt uncomfortable because them days are gone now, and I don't want to be that person that does do them things all the time. You know, going back to the football club and want to do things like that because I've moved on to something else. Don't get me wrong, there are people that do that and they enjoy doing that. So you know that's all up to them. But I don't. That's not me. That's not how I want to be. And like even my dad said to me at times, "Oh, you must have loved that." I appreciated it, but I didn't really like it because them days are gone. I don't play football anymore, and I want to now people to look at me as the here and now, not as the things that I've done in the past as a player. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I will go on to touch a little bit on the media work shortly. That's fine. I wanted to ask as well about, so you've, when I look back at your kind of 3 years, I know the sandwich between going to Royal Antwerp. Yeah. So the first year you get that one appearance like you mentioned at Barnsley, and then after Royal Antwerp you come back and play several games for the first team after the treble winning season. Yeah. I was just going to say, what's the game that stands out? Is it the Barnsley game that stands out for you, or is one of the 7 appearances? Yeah, it was my home debut against Leicester. I think it was strange because it tended to happen like that. Sorry, Ferguson. I remember I was training. I'd travelled with the first team a few times. I'd been on the bench, but never been. Sorry, in the Champions League, I'd been on the bench, but I'd never been on the bench in the Premier League. And then we played Tottenham away. I think we got beat, and I was on the bench, which was new to me. First thing I'd do, bring my mum and dad, listen, I'm on the bench, and it was great. Then I think on a Tuesday or the Wednesday we played Sturm Graz, and I was on the bench in the Champions League, and I came on for the last 20, 25 minutes. It was just like, that week was just a continual type of rise. And then on the Saturday we were playing Leicester at home, and I've gone into the changing rooms, and Dennis was injured. I don't know what had happened with Mikel, whether he was injured or not. And as I've got into the dressing room, just sat down and things like that, Phil's come up to me, Phil Neville, he's gone, "You playing?" I was going, don't whine and things like that. He went, "No," he said, "I'm telling you, you're playing." Yeah. So I've just been told that you're playing. You know, you're playing left back. So I was like, right, okay. So I left it at that. Next thing, names the team, and I'm playing left back. Yeah. And I was just like, okay. And I just couldn't wait to get going. The only thing I was gutted about is that I rang my mum and dad, but didn't have time to get to the game or anything. So I was a bit disappointed about that. But it was a dream because, like, as a youngster, you know, it's still the same now. You know, when you used to be sat in the stand, and then, you know, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the teams of da-da-da and Manchester United, and then the music comes on, and then you'd all stand up and start clapping. All of a sudden, here's me. I'm actually in the tunnel. Yeah. And I'm coming out, and it was just, it was an unbelievable feeling for to make my full debut at home for a club like this. B, the club that I've supported all my life, that all my family support. Yeah. You know, and it went really well. It was great, you know, to play against Leicester. I think we won 2-0, and everything went really well, and I enjoyed it. I'd had the taste of it. Yeah. And I wanted more. And then the following week, I was playing for the reserves, I think, against Everton at Gig Lane, and I didn't give a good account of myself. It was, I would say, probably for about 4 or 5 weeks after I played that first team game, I did find it difficult then to raise you, to then come back down. Which, in my opinion, now, if any youngster wants to ask me for advice that's played in the first team, that's the biggest thing. Yeah. Because you know, if you play in the first team and then you go and play for what is now the under-21s, guarantee there's eyes on you. Yeah. How's he going to react? How's he going to react? Is it going to be a case of, oh, I don't want to go back down to this level of feelers, or I've passed that, or is it going to be, right, I've had a taste of that and I want more, but the only way I'm going to get more is if I impress in this game. Yeah. You know, these next few games. So, but it was only for one game, but still people are watching, and I think it's very important that your attitude is right. Yeah. And just a couple more questions regarding the sort of few years in the first team. Obviously, you went off to Royal Antwerp in between in that treble winning year.
and it's a bit of a black mark now, the incident that happened over there with the referee and the subsequent ban and what have you. Do you remember, obviously Sir Alex was sort of renowned throughout his career to be a bit of a disciplinarian himself at times with youngsters at the club, if they sort of transgressed any rules and what have you. Do you remember the phone call that you received from Sir Alex, or the conversation you had with him after that incident, and what was said?
I remember I had a chat with him. One of the first things he did was offer me and Ronnie a new contract. Yeah. Which was unbelievable, because we didn't even know where our football career was going. There was no anger, there was nothing. The one thing I will say about Sir Alex Ferguson is that he had the first team squad and he had to look after them. He knew all the youngsters. He knew their characters, he knew their mentality, and he knew what they were like. And he considered himself a good judge of character. Yeah. The minute this happened, he had no thought in his mind that we'd actually done what we'd been accused of. Yeah. And he told us that in no uncertain words. He said, we want to give you a new contract, we're going to stand behind you. We know what you're like as individuals, we know what your characters are like, and we know that you wouldn't do anything like this. Yeah. And that was special, that was good to know. And came over to Belgium, to the Glass House with us, which is the Belgian equivalent of the FA headquarters. And the referee, I've never on the pitch, yes, you want to give everything you've got and everything, but off the pitch I consider myself quite a mellow person, quite relaxed, and I've never wanted to punch someone, hit someone in my life as much as I wanted to at that time with that referee. Yeah. My dad, there's another level. If my dad ever would have got hold of him, then I think there would have been a lot of problems, because this was a man was lying, and was putting a big risk at mine and Ronnie's career. Yeah. And I always believe that the truth does come out. I always believe in things like that. And we sat down. I had an interpreter telling me what I'd supposed to have done, because the referee and the linesman telling me that Ronnie had punched him or headbutted him. I'd then grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and headbutted him. Just all these things. I was just like, these people can't believe him. Surely they cannot believe him. Yeah. But they did. He was FIFA listed at the time, so he was the #1 referee in Belgium. So his word was gospel. So we appealed it. Yeah. And we went to the appeal, and we ended up getting a longer ban. And I was just like, I remember I started getting random nosebleeds just because just feeling everything about it. All of a sudden I was like, my career's started, but this could be the beginning of the end before I've even got going. Yeah. And then he refereed the first game in Belgium for the new season. I think it was 6-6, and he had a disaster. And they interviewed him live on national television, and he blamed me and Ronnie. Yeah. He said he's still having nightmares about us and this, that, and what have you, which biggest load of rubbish. Yeah. So they backed him, and then either the next week or the week after that, he refereed a game which was 1-0, and I think it was a bizarre goal. And he was questioned again live on television straight after it. Yeah. And he was told to go and get psychiatric help, which I think he had to do, and then the bans were quashed. Yeah. But it just left a real bitter taste in my mouth, just because of the fact of why would somebody do this? Why would somebody try and make a name for themselves by destroying two young lads' careers? Yeah. And not meaning to be on purpose, and I like to think I've had a good relationship with referees afterwards. Yeah. But I think you get a little bit wary at times, because once bitten type thing. But I like to think that my football career spoke for itself as I got older. Never got sent off in my professional career or anything, but that did leave a sour taste in my mouth. But what they say, don't kill you makes you stronger. Absolutely, yeah. And just obviously now, I mean, it's an obvious thing to say, but was it a first team game that this transpired in? Because there mustn't have been any cameras on it then. No, there wasn't. Well, what happened was on the Thursday, it was in the playoffs at the end of the season for Royal Antwerp, and on the Thursday we'd played a game in the playoffs, and the fans had rioted. Right. So part of it now we had to play on the Sunday, but we had to play behind closed doors. Right. So we just travelled to the middle of nowhere. But one of the fortunate things of it was that his story began not to add up, because all this happened in the tunnel. Now, what was caught on camera, which was good, because I think there was a few amateur people filming it. At the end of the game, when you had the old advertising hoardings which would swing round before the digital ones came in. Yeah. I was really angry because we'd got beat 1-0 in the last minute by a lad who was 5 yards offside, and that was as good as us out of the playoffs. Yeah. And I put my foot through an advertising hoarding, and it would have been comical to see it. I couldn't get my foot out. I'd hit it that hard that my foot had got stuck in there. So then my boots come off. So my foot stuck in there and my boots at the bottom of it.
You've been watching Tamori Ketspire a few years earlier.
So, but this ended up actually working out in my favour.
Yeah.
So basically I've done that, then I've managed to pull my foot out, managed to pull my boot out as well.
Yeah.
Then I've walked into the tunnel, and as I'm walking into the tunnel, I've taken my shirt off and I've thrown my shirt on the floor. So the referee then to his defence said, you know, I was one of the first players into the tunnel. Obviously I wasn't, and that was proven.
Yeah.
And then he knew it was me by my number on the back of my shirt. I'd taken my shirt off.
Yeah.
So at first he believed him, but then his story started to get cracks in it.
Yeah.
And like I say, you know, the truth prevailed in the end, but it was a worrying time for me then, because, you know, I had this individual who, you know, you forgive him, I like to think that I'm a forgiving person, but never ever. I'd probably go as far as to say that if I saw him now, I wouldn't hit him or anything, but I'd probably have a few choice words to say to him, because biggest thing, ask him why.
Yeah.
Why have you done that? If it was true, listen, if it's true, then fair enough. You've got every right to do what you want to do.
Yeah.
But because it's not true, just to sit down and just see where his thought process was at the time. I won't fall out or anything. I would like to know.
Yeah,
I'd like
curiosity.
to just out of curiosity, because it doesn't matter now. It's finished and it didn't affect my career.
Yeah.
But you know, why did you feel the need to lie? Why did you feel the need to put at risk mine and Ronnie Warwick's career? What was in it for you? You know, and that would be the one thing I would love to do, to sit down with him and ask him that question.
Yeah. And then just to finish up on the United side of things, you mentioned there that you were quite aware of when it was time to depart from the club. I was going to say, was it ultimately the fact that, like you mentioned before, you had 3 top-notch left-backs essentially ahead of you in the pecking order that ultimately led you to leave?
I was going to give it one more year.
Yeah.
Because it was the summer, and I decided that I'd give it one more year till I was 22. If nothing had progressed that summer, then I'd go and see Sir Alex Ferguson and say that, you know, I'd like to leave.
Yeah.
Because I'm very aware of overstaying your welcome at a club. As a youngster in particular, timing is everything.
Yeah.
You know, you leave a year too early, your career can suffer. You leave a year too late, your career definitely will suffer.
Yeah.
And it was probably Sir Alex Ferguson that made my mind up for me by actually ringing me and telling me that Derby had come in for me.
Yeah.
That, you know, you didn't have to go. He didn't say to me, you're not going.
Yeah.
You know, it was a case of you don't have to go. And my mind was made up straight away. And it come to a time where, right, okay, I don't feature in his plans. I've got 2 options here. I can stay at a football club where I'm not going to be playing in the first team.
Yeah.
I can probably go out on loan and then come back and may still find myself in the same situation. And one thing I would say about Sir Alex Ferguson then is that he didn't let go of youngsters that then went on to prove him wrong at that time.
Yeah.
Yes, there's probably been a couple since people will probably talk about PK and Pogba and things like that, but at that time, there's been nobody. You know, all the young lads that had gone, and what I had seen as well was that lads leaving a football club at 23, looking at where their next move was, looking at the league where they were going to play in, then looking at lads at 2021 leaving and seeing where their next move was. And more often than not, the lads that left at 21, they got the better moves.
Yeah.
And for a Premier League club as well to come in and offer, I think it was maybe £2 million to offer that money for me, and a somewhat untested player was a big gamble from them. But you know, I felt that then, okay, it's time to stand on my own 2 feet now.
Yeah.
And it was, like I say, people say it was a hard decision. It wasn't a difficult decision in the slightest.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I think a few of the lads that I've spoke to, like yourself, from certainly that generation of younger lads that left the club, you went on to have quite an established career at the top flight. Some of the players, like you mentioned, might play lower down the division. So obviously your decision in the end was vindicated.
Yeah, definitely.
One last question before we discuss your career subsequent to United. I just wanted to ask, and I've got a feeling I probably know the answer to this as well, because all the lads I asked this question to pretty much pinpoint the same fella. From your time training and playing with the first team, who's the player that sticks out for you? You'll probably guess the player that everyone mentions as well. But who's the player that, when you just looked at him, you were wowed by, like the footballing ability?
So I'm taking that most people are going to say Cantona.
Well, it's Scholesy. Obviously Eric as well, a bit early, but the lads I into, you know, the
Scholes was a genius.
Yeah,
he was an absolute genius, and not you appreciated how good he was when you trained with him.
Yeah.
But when I appreciated him even more so how good he was when I actually played against him when I'd moved clubs.
Right. Yeah.
Whether it be for Derby, Southampton, Sunderland. Biggest one was Stoke.
Yeah.
Biggest one by far was Stoke, because we used to give as good as we got, especially at home. We had Tony Pulis would make the pitch as small as possible, and we used to bully teams. We used to get in amongst them. We could never get a result against Manchester United in the first few years, though. That's because of him. Because Paul Scholes, he would, I'm not kidding you, he would get the ball, and no matter how small we'd made the pitch, he used to look as though he had half an hour on the ball.
Yeah.
And it was ridiculous. It was unbelievable. And for me, I know people talk about, I'm talking about great players now, like your Gerrards and your Lampards and people like that, but for me, Scholes was the best.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that from a point of view because I support Manchester United and things like that. I don't believe that I'm saying that from a bias. He was just a genius in every sense of the word.
Yeah.
Just everything about him he was just top notch and very humble as well. I remember, I think I came here with Southampton. We played them, and what I used to do, I used to get shirts, and then the following season when we played, we used to get them signed to my eldest son. Yeah. And I didn't get loads. If I'd had a bad appearance, if I'd had a bad game or we'd been battered, never do that. Yeah. If I'd had a good game, maybe we might have been beaten 2-3-0, whatever, especially as coming to a club like Manchester United. But if I'd had a good game, and I think, right, okay, I'll go and get one. So I remember going up to Scholes and said, listen, Scholes, will you do me a favour? Can I have your shirt? It's for my son, and then next time I see you, will you sign it? Yeah. She's like, yeah, no problem. So he's taking off his shirt, giving it to me. And I'm walking off, and all I can hear is Scholes going, oi! Yeah. And just like, turn around, what? He went, give me your shirt. I'm like, you want my shirt? What are you going to do if you got your cars to clean or something like that? But he wanted my shirt, and just things like that. Do you know what I mean? And I've seen him in recent times, doing certain work, like going with ITV. He was in Ireland a month or so ago, and sat down and chatted for ages. And that's what I'm saying. The thing like that when you've been at a football club like this and you've grown up here. And like I say, people think you're a decent lad and things like that. They've got time for you. Yeah. And but no, he was unbelievable. But I feel as though I was so fortunate to be around so many, yes, talented players, but their mentality. The mentality was a thing that shone with me. When we were apprentices, we used to get one Wednesday afternoon off a month. And we'd all be in the shower, come in, be getting changed. Gary Neville and Phil Neville pop their head around the corner. Right, let's get your kits back on. We're going up on Wembley this afternoon. So you had the big pitch at the cliff, and at the back it's like a bit of a slope and a little area. Then we'd be doing heading practice, and at the time it'd annoy you because you're thinking, I want this afternoon. But then after you've done it for a few weeks, you think to yourself, hang on, Gary Neville's now an established Manchester United player, an established England player, and Phil Neville's getting games in the first team as well. If it's good enough for them, it's got to be good enough for me. So as much as you look to the technical ability, for me, the biggest thing that stood out was the desire, the determination, the commitment. Roy Keane took it into management. You train how you play. If you don't train how you're going to play, you know what, you're not playing. Yeah. And when he was a manager, it didn't matter if you'd scored a hat-trick the week before. If you didn't show that desire and hunger and commitment during the week, you won't be playing on that Saturday. Yeah. And that was something that was instilled in me from a really young age, and something that I would like to think was probably one of my strongest points, because for me to play for as long as I did in the Premier League, I couldn't give 85%. I wasn't one of these players that could turn it on and off. Yeah. Technically I wasn't the most gifted, so it had to be 100% every single day, and that was taught to me at Manchester United, not just from the manager, but these world-class players, and I mean world-class players. I was so fortunate to be able to train with the players in that squad, and not one of them didn't train how they played, because if they did, they weren't playing. And that was the biggest thing that I took from that football club.